Welcome to another edition of Talking Ball. Jack here, and today we are going to be doing another 2016 NBA draft profile focusing on the power forward from North Carolina, Brice Johnson. So let's get into it. Brice Johnson, this year he's 6'9", 230 pounds. He was born on June 27th, 1994. This season he averaged 17.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Now he did this while shooting 62% from the field and an impressive 79% from the free throw line for a big man. Now, what are some positives about Brice Johnson as he enters the draft? Well, first of all, the dude is a pogo stick. I mean, this guy can get up with the best of them. His vertical is definitely going to measure in around 40 inches at the combine. He really can jump with pretty much anyone. And the fact that he's put on all this weight since his freshman season just adds on to the fact that he's an athletic specimen. Speaking of that weight, when he came in as a freshman at North Carolina, he only weighed 187 pounds, and now he's listed at 230. Some sites have him at 228, as he did take off a little weight from his junior season, as he said he wanted to become a little more springier, a little more mobile, because he felt the weight was a little bit of a hindrance the past season. So he took a little bit off, but clearly this year it's paid off for him as he's had a breakout season. Some other positives for Brice Johnson. He can play the 4 or the 5 in today's NBA. And what I mean by that is you look at him, and I'll get into the player comparison later, but you look at him and he looks like a typical NBA power forward, 6'9", 230. I mean, that's prototypical measurements. But in today's NBA, you can really get away with a guy like that playing center for stretches, and I think it's going to be a benefit for him that the NBA has downsized so much in recent years that it really extends his versatility as a player. He has a good mid-range jumper, and I say mid-range because I think it extends from about the free throw line to about 18 feet, where he feels comfortable and he can knock down his shots in rhythm. It'll be interesting to see if that jump shot will develop to, a little deeper, maybe out to the three-point land in the corner 3 area. But it's not something that's that big of a deal, I don't think, because as long as he can hit those shots effectively, which he does currently, it should be fine. He also does have a nice turnaround jump shot that he can get off pretty much on anybody on command. He can do this because he elevates so well, as I mentioned earlier, and he's very quick. He can get off his release in a quick period of time. And his post moves are good, but he likes to do them quickly, as I just said before. He likes to go off 1 or 2 dribbles and go up. Important to note about Brice Johnson, though, is he did set the North Carolina record with 23 double-doubles this past season. And I know Duke's front line is not humongous, but he did average 23.5 and 20 rebounds against Duke. And that says something about showing up in primetime games. I mean, those numbers are ludicrous. And the numbers he put up against Florida State earlier in the year in that game were 39 points and 23 rebounds, I believe. The guy put up some freakish numbers this year, and it really showed the progress he's made since his freshman year, and even last season. So let's get into some negatives here. I don't see much room for growth for Brice Johnson. Yes, I mentioned his jump shot can improve, but I just don't see him improving into a super, great player, an all-star caliber player. I think he's going to be a good role addition to some NBA team, but I just don't see him making another leap forward. As I said earlier, I don't see him adding. I don't think it's likely. Not that I don't see him adding. I just don't see it being likely he adds a 3-point shot. Although I will say it's tough for me to count him out, because the way people have been adding jump shots in three-pointers specifically in the NBA, it's very possible for him to do that. And the fact that he's such good touch from 12 to 18 feet already does seem to make it a possibility that he will do that. And another negative for Brice Johnson to me is his motor runs hot and cold. Yes, he put up those huge numbers against Duke, but in the second half, he really disappeared in the first game. And at times, he just tends to disappear from games. And I don't know why that is, but his motor just isn't always going. And that's something that is, I mean, not all guys can have a motor that's always going, right? Like, this is I'm nitpicking here. But great players tend to have motors that are just always going, and I just don't see that when I watch Brice Johnson play. He does take stretches off, but when his motor is going, he's constant energy. He runs the floor very well for a big man, as noted by his athleticism. Leaking out for transition points is something he does well, and coming back to protect the rim in transition is another thing he does very well. Now, where have I seen him go in mock drafts? He has a huge range. I've seen him anywhere from the late lottery to the early second round, and that's a huge difference money-wise. I mean, if you're the 30th pick, last pick in the first round, that you get guaranteed money and you are set for a couple of years there. But if you're a second round pick, 31 and above, you're not getting any guarantees, and that's a huge difference monetarily for any of these guys coming out. So look for Johnson to really try to improve his stock as he goes through the combines and workouts for teams. Now, where do I see him going? I think he's going to end up settling in the early 20s range in comparison with that late lottery to early second. I just don't see him as a lottery guy just because of NBA teams look for potential. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily correct in how I would view it, but that's what they're looking for. And so a guy like Marquese Chriss from Washington has tons of potential because you haven't seen him do some of the things that Brice Johnson can do right now. And while I don't think that's fair to Johnson because there's no guarantee that Chriss can reach the level that Johnson's at now, that's how NBA teams tend to draft. So I think it's going to hurt Johnson. Having said that, though, he is a young senior. So he's only going to turn 22 in June. So he does still have some room for growth. He's not one of these seniors that's 23, 24 coming out of the draft. He's only going to be 22. He's still 21 now. So that is a plus for him in terms of his age. Where do I see him, or who do I see him as a pro comparison? Lots of people in the first comparison that jumped out to me was Taj Gibson, and I get it. I mean, he's a traditional power forward. He can score offensively, and he'll be solid on the defensive end. But there's just certain things about that comparison that just don't add up. I mean, Taj Gibson is a good offensive player, but I think actually Brice Johnson is going to be a better offensive player than Taj Gibson. However, on the defensive end, I don't know if it's really that close. Taj Gibson, to me, is a great defender, and I don't know if Brice Johnson ever gets that level. I see him as someone being an above-average defender who can block shots and maybe steal the ball occasionally, but he's going to be not an elite defender, not an elite post defender, or even a very good one like a Taj Gibson. So therefore, I think it's tough to ever compare someone to one specific player. So I think you got to get some Taj Gibson, some Carlos Boozer in there, and his former North Carolina teammate, maybe for a season, I believe. Actually, I don't scratch that. He wasn't his teammate, but a North Carolina alum, John Henson. Those are the three guys who I think kind of mesh well, and if you were to take bits and pieces from their games, I think that would turn into Brice Johnson. And as far as team fits go, I mean, this is where his talent really benefits him, and I think it's going to really help him in the draft because there's no team where he can fit poorly on. Yes, there's teams like the Cavs who have a lot of big men, but you add Brice Johnson, he can go play right away 12 minutes a game, 12 to 15 minutes a game, and he'll be an addition to your team. I think really if you look up and down the NBA, any team could use a Brice Johnson. He's going to come in, he's going to play well for stretches, and he's going to He's not going to be a hindrance on the offensive end. He's going to be a plus there, and he's not going to hurt you on the defensive end. He's going to be at least average from the get-go to above average potentially. All right, guys, so that's what I think about Brice Johnson. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for listening.